At the center of this storm stood Megan Bennett, a beloved high school English teacher known for her warm smile and dedication to her students. Her husband, Ethan, was a successful real estate agent with a charismatic personality that could charm the coldest of hearts. They seemed like the perfect couple, often seen holding hands at the local farmers market or cheering together at Friday night football games. But appearances can be deceiving, and beneath the veneer of their picture-perfect marriage lay a web of secrets and betrayal. The catalyst for the impending chaos was Megan's younger sister, Sienna, 10 years Megan's junior. Sienna had always been the wild child of the family, flitting from one adventure to another across the country. Her recent return to Riverton had stirred up old tensions and awakened new desires. As the Bennett family prepared for their annual autumn gathering, an event that typically brought joy and togetherness, little did they know that this year's reunion would end in bloodshed. Megan Marie Bennett was born and raised in Riverton, the eldest of 2 daughters. She had always been the responsible one, the rock upon which her family relied. From a young age, Megan showed a passion for literature and a natural talent for teaching. She excelled in her studies at Riverton High, where she would later return as an educator. After graduating with honors, Megan attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison, earning a degree in English literature. Her college years were marked by academic achievement and a growing sense of independence, yet the pull of home remained strong. Upon graduation, she returned to Riverton to begin her teaching career. It was during her first year of teaching that Megan met Ethan Bennett. She was 23, idealistic, and instantly captivated by his confident charm. Their courtship was a whirlwind of romantic gestures and shared dreams. Ethan spoke of building a life together in Riverton, of raising a family in the town they both loved. Megan, who had always valued stability and community, fell deeply in love with both the man and the future he promised. They married after a year of dating in a ceremony that the town still talked about years later. Megan threw herself into being the perfect wife, just as she had been the perfect daughter and student. She balanced her teaching career with supporting Ethan's ambitions, always putting others before herself. For years, she believed she had achieved the happily ever after she had always dreamed of, unaware of the cracks forming in the foundation of her marriage. Ethan Bennett came from old money, his family among the founders of Riverton. The Bennetts had a reputation for being charming, successful, and slightly dangerous. Ethan grew up with the weight of these expectations on his shoulders, the pressure to maintain the family legacy ever present. As a child, Ethan was known for his mischievous smile and ability to talk his way out of trouble. These traits served him well as he grew into a handsome young man with a silver tongue. He breezed through high school more on charm than academic effort, and while he attended college, he never quite found his passion in academics. Returning to Riverton after a lackluster college experience, Ethan joined his father's real estate firm. He quickly proved to have a natural talent for sales, his charisma and local connections making him one of the top agents in the county. Ethan reveled in his success, enjoying the status and admiration it brought him. When he met Megan, Ethan saw in her everything he lacked: stability, intellectual depth, and genuine goodness. He pursued her with the same intensity he applied to closing a difficult sale. In Megan, he believed he had found the missing piece that would make him truly worthy of the Bennett name. Yet beneath Ethan's polished exterior lurked insecurities and desires he couldn't quite quell. The thrill of the chase, whether in business or his personal life, was something he found hard to resist. As the years passed, the excitement of his marriage to Megan began to wane, leaving him vulnerable to temptation. Sienna Carter had always been a free spirit, much to the chagrin of her parents and the fascination of the townspeople. 10 years younger than Megan, she grew up in her sister's shadow, constantly compared to the golden child of the family. Where Megan was studious and responsible, Sienna was creative and impulsive. After a tumultuous adolescence marked by rebellious behavior and family arguments, Sienna left Riverton the day after her high school graduation. For years, she drifted from city to city, taking odd jobs and chasing dreams of becoming an artist. Her family received sporadic updates, a postcard from Seattle, a phone call from Miami, always with the promise that she was on the verge of something big. Sienna's return to Riverton came as a surprise to everyone, including herself. At 28, with her dreams of artistic success unfulfilled and her savings depleted, she found herself back in her childhood bedroom. She took a job as a barista at the local coffee shop, her exotic experiences and worldly attitude causing quite a stir among the locals. Readjusting to small-town life was a challenge for Sienna. She felt stifled by the familiarity and judgment she perceived from every corner. It was in this state of restlessness and vulnerability that she reconnected with her brother-in-law, Ethan, setting in motion the events that would lead to tragedy. The first inkling of trouble came to Megan on a mundane Tuesday afternoon. She was grading papers in her classroom, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the empty desks, when she noticed a text message notification on Ethan's linked iPad he had left at home. It was from Sienna. A simple message that read, "Can't wait to see you later." Same place, the words themselves were innocent enough, but something about the tone set off alarm bells in Megan's mind. Over the next few weeks, Megan found herself paying closer attention to the little details she had previously overlooked. Ethan's late nights at the office became more frequent. He was protective of his phone, always keeping it face down or in his pocket. Sienna, who had been a frequent visitor to their home since her return, suddenly became scarce, offering vague excuses when invited to family dinners. Megan tried to rationalize these changes, telling herself she was being paranoid. After all, Ethan and Sienna had always gotten along well. It was natural for them to be friends, wasn't it? But the knot in her stomach grew tighter with each passing day. The definitive proof came on a rainy Saturday afternoon. Megan had decided to surprise Ethan at his office, thinking she might convince him to knock off early and enjoy a rare weekend together. As she approached the real estate agency, she saw Ethan's car parked in its usual spot. But as she drew closer, she noticed another familiar vehicle, Sienna's beat-up Volkswagen Beetle, parked discreetly around the corner. Heart pounding, Megan approached the office building. Through the rain-streaked window, she could make out two figures in Ethan's private office. They were embracing, their silhouettes merging into one as Megan watched, frozen in disbelief. In that moment, her world shattered. Megan didn't confront them. Instead, she retreated to her car, her mind a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a deep, aching sadness warred within her. She drove aimlessly for hours, eventually finding herself parked at the edge of Lake Riverton, where she and Ethan had shared their first kiss. As the reality of the situation sank in, Megan's initial shock gave way to a cold, calculated anger. Memories flooded her mind: Ethan's late nights, Sienna's awkward behavior, the knowing look she had dismissed from town gossips. How long had this been going on? How could her own sister, her flesh and blood, betray her like this? In that moment, staring out at the still waters of the lake, something shifted inside Megan. The kind, forgiving teacher was replaced by a woman scorned, determined to make the betrayers pay for their actions. She thought of the upcoming family gathering, an event that had always been a source of joy. Now it presented an opportunity, a chance to expose Ethan and Sienna's deceit in front of everyone they knew. As Megan drove home, her mind was already formulating a plan. The annual Bennett family gathering would be the perfect stage for her revenge. Little did she know, her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. In the days following her discovery, Megan moved through her daily routine like a ghost, her mind constantly churning with plans for revenge. She maintained a facade of normality, smiling at her students, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues, and even managing civil conversations with Ethan. But beneath this calm exterior, a storm was brewing. Megan's plans centered around the annual Bennett family gathering, scheduled for the following weekend. It was a tradition that brought together extended family and close friends, a celebration of togetherness that now seemed like a cruel joke to Megan. She decided this would be the perfect setting for her grand revelation. Her preparations were meticulous. First, she gathered evidence screenshots of text messages she had managed to retrieve from Ethan's iPad, credit card statements showing suspicious purchases, and even a few photos she had discreetly taken of Ethan and Sienna together in town. She compiled these into a folder, a dossier of betrayal that she planned to dramatically reveal at the gathering. Next, Megan carefully crafted her approach. She would wait until dinner was in full swing, when everyone was relaxed and slightly buzzed from the flowing wine. She would stand to make a toast, a tradition she had always participated in, praising family and love. But this year, her words would be laced with venom, culminating in the exposure of Ethan and Sienna's affair. As she plotted her revenge, Megan began to feel a sense of empowerment she hadn't experienced in years. For too long, she had been the good wife, the dutiful sister, always putting the needs of others before her own. Now, she was taking control, ready to destroy the facade that had been her life for so long. However, as the day of the gathering approached, Megan's anger began to shift into something darker, something more dangerous. The betrayal she felt from her sister cut deeper than any wound she had ever experienced, and the thought of Ethan's smug face, believing he had gotten away with his affair, made her blood boil. Megan knew that simply exposing their affair wouldn't be enough. She wanted them to suffer, to feel the same pain and humiliation she had endured. As she stood in her kitchen the night before the gathering, her eyes fell on a bottle of sleeping pills she had been prescribed months ago but had never used. An idea began to form in her mind, an idea that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The air was filled with the aroma of grilled meats, fresh bread, and Aunt Beatrice's apple pie. Wine flowed freely, loosening tongues and brightening cheeks. Megan sat at one end of the table, Ethan at the other, with Sienna seated strategically between them. Throughout the meal, Megan watched their interactions with hawk-like intensity. She noticed the subtle glances, the way their hands brushed when passing dishes, the inside jokes that elicited quiet laughter. The conversation ebbed and flowed around her, but Megan barely participated. She nodded at appropriate times, forced laughter when expected, all while a countdown ticked in her head. Her hand occasionally strayed to her pocket, where the folder of evidence sat like a ticking time bomb. As the main course was cleared away and dessert was brought out, the tension around Megan became palpable. Uncle Theo, always perceptive, asked if she was feeling all right. Megan assured him she was fine, just a bit tired from all the preparations. Ethan, from the other end of the table, raised an eyebrow in concern, but didn't press the issue. Sienna, perhaps sensing the undercurrent of tension, became increasingly nervous. She laughed too loudly at jokes, spilled wine on her dress, and kept glancing at Megan with a mix of guilt and apprehension. As Aunt Beatrice began serving her apple pie, Megan knew the moment had come. She stood slowly, wine glass in hand, and gently tapped it with a spoon. All eyes turned to her, expecting the usual heartwarming toast about family and love. Instead, they were about to witness the unraveling of everything the Bennett family held dear. Megan's voice, when she began to speak, was calm and measured, betraying none of the turmoil within. She started by thanking everyone for coming, for being part of the Bennett family tradition. She spoke of love, loyalty, and trust values that had been the bedrock of their family for generations. Then her tone shifted. "I've always believed in the strength of our family," she said, her eyes locking onto Ethan, "but sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who betray us in the worst ways." A hush fell over the gathering. Ethan's face drained of color as he realized what was happening. Sienna, seated between them, began to tremble visibly. With deliberate slowness, Megan reached into her pocket and withdrew the folder. From it, she produced copies of text messages, credit card statements, and photos. Her voice grew harder as she laid out the evidence of Ethan and Sienna's affair, detailing their secret meetings and lies. The reactions around the table ranged from gasps of shock to muttered denials. Aunt Beatrice's hand flew to her mouth, while Uncle Theo's face darkened with anger. The children, sensing the adult tension, fell unusually quiet. Ethan attempted to interject, to offer some explanation, but Megan silenced him with a look of pure venom. Sienna, tears streaming down her face, made no attempt to deny the accusations. As Megan's revelation reached its crescendo, she turned to address the entire gathering. "This is the truth of our perfect family," she declared, her voice shaking with emotion. "This is what becomes of trust and loyalty in the Bennett family." The silence that followed Megan's revelation was deafening, broken only by the sound of a fork clattering to the ground. Then, as if a dam had burst, chaos erupted around the table. Aunt Beatrice let out a wail of disbelief, while Uncle Theo's face turned a dangerous shade of red as he lunged towards Ethan. Cousin Dominic quickly intervened, restraining his father from doing something he might regret. The children, sensing the gravity of the situation, began to cry, adding to the cacophony of shouting and recriminations. Fiona hurriedly gathered her kids, ushering them inside the house and away from the unfolding drama. Fina, Dominic's new wife, sat frozen in shock, her eyes darting between Ethan and Sienna as if seeing them for the first time. Other family friends muttered among themselves, some edging away from the table, unsure whether to leave or stay. Amidst the uproar, Ethan remained seated, his head in his hands, while Sienna sobbed uncontrollably, mascara streaking down her face. Megan stood at the head of the table, a mixture of vindication and despair washing over her as she watched her family splinter before her eyes. As the initial shock began to subside, Ethan finally found his voice. He stood, hands raised in a pleading gesture, and attempted to address the gathering. His usual charm deserted him as he stumbled over his words, trying to explain, to justify, to somehow mitigate the damage done. Megan cut him off, her voice cold and sharp as steel. She demanded to know how long the affair had been going on, how they could betray her so callously. Sienna, still sobbing, choked out that it had started shortly after her return to Springfield, that she never meant for it to happen. The confrontation quickly devolved into a three-way shouting match. Ethan accused Megan of emotional neglect, of being more devoted to her students than to their marriage. Megan fired back, listing all the sacrifices she had made for him, the dreams she had put on hold to support his career. Sienna, caught between them, alternated between pleading for forgiveness and defending her actions. She spoke of feeling lost, of the connection she had found with Ethan, of mistakes made in moments of weakness. Their words became weapons, each accusation and counter-accusation drawing blood. Years of unspoken resentments and buried feelings erupted to the surface. Megan revealed her suspicions of other affairs, her growing disillusionment with their life together. Ethan, his composure crumbling, admitted to feelings of inadequacy, of constantly striving to live up to the Bennett family name. As the argument reached a fever pitch, Uncle Theo intervened, physically placing himself between Ethan and Megan. His booming voice cut through the chaos, demanding that everyone take a step back and calm down. In the momentary lull that followed Uncle Theo's intervention, no one noticed Aunt Beatrice quietly making her way to the kitchen. When she returned, clutching something behind her back, her usually kind face was contorted with rage. Before anyone could react, Aunt Beatrice lunged at Sienna, swinging a heavy cast iron skillet. The blow caught Sienna on the side of her head with a sickening thud. She crumpled to the ground, blood quickly pooling around her still form. The scene exploded into pandemonium. Megan screamed a primal sound of horror that cut through the shocked silence. Ethan rushed to Sienna's side, cradling her limp body and yelling for someone to call an ambulance. Uncle Theo wrestled the skillet from Beatrice's grasp as she stood there, dazed as if she couldn't quite believe what she had done. Dominic's face was ashen as he fumbled with his phone, hands shaking as he dialed 911. In the chaos, no one immediately noticed Megan slipping away from the scene. As sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second, she moved through the house in a daze, her mind struggling to process the horrific turn of events. The arrival of the ambulance and police shattered the last vestiges of normalcy in the Bennett household. Paramedics rushed to attend to Sienna, their urgent voices and swift movements a blur of activity in the bloodstained backyard. The police, responding to reports of a violent disturbance, began cordoning off the area and separating family members for questioning. Sienna, still unconscious, was quickly loaded into the ambulance, with paramedics working feverishly as they sped toward Springfield General Hospital, fighting to stabilize her condition. Ethan, his shirt stained with Sienna's blood, insisted on riding in the ambulance, his face a mask of guilt and fear. Back at the house, the police struggled to piece together the events of the evening. Family members, still in shock, gave conflicting accounts. Aunt Beatrice, the attacker, sat silently in a police cruiser, her vacant stare a stark contrast to her earlier rage. As the chaos unfolded, a chilling realization swept through the gathering. Megan was nowhere to be found. Initial assumptions that she had accompanied Sienna to the hospital proved false. Panic began to set in as family members and police searched the house and surrounding property, calling Megan's name with increasing desperation. It was Dominic who made the grim discovery. Following a hunch, he made his way to the old boathouse by Lake Springfield, a short distance from the Bennett property. There, he found Megan's body hanging from the rafters, a hastily scribbled note clutched in her lifeless hand. The note, tear-stained and barely legible, spoke of unbearable pain and betrayal. Megan's final words expressed regret for the hurt she had caused, but also a deep-seated anger at the betrayal that had driven her to this point. She had never intended for violence to erupt, never imagined the devastating consequences of her revelation. As word of Megan's suicide spread, a pall of grief and guilt descended upon the family. The flashing lights of emergency vehicles illuminated faces contorted with anguish, the once joyous family gathering now irreversibly shattered. At the hospital, doctors fought to save Sienna's life. Her condition was critical due to the severe head trauma. Ethan, relegated to the waiting room, was confronted with the full weight of his actions and their tragic consequences. In the span of a few hours, the Bennett family had been torn apart by betrayal, violence, and death. The quaint town of Springfield, once known for its tranquility, would forever be scarred by the events of this fateful night. The police investigation was thorough and swift. Aunt Beatrice was arrested and charged with aggravated assault. Despite her age and previously spotless record, the brutality of her attack left little room for leniency. Ethan found himself under scrutiny as well. While not directly responsible for the violence, his affair with Sienna was seen as the catalyst for the entire tragedy. He faced potential charges related to adultery, which was still technically illegal in Wisconsin, though rarely prosecuted. The trial, when it came, was a somber affair. The courtroom was packed each day with Springfield residents, all struggling to comprehend how their picture-perfect neighbors had come to this. The legal proceedings concluded with a series of somber sentences that reflected the tragic nature of the events.
Aunt Beatrice, despite her advanced age and the character witnesses who spoke of her previously gentle nature, was sentenced to 5 years in prison for aggravated assault. However, due to her declining health and the unusual circumstances of the case, the judge allowed for the possibility of home confinement after serving 2 years, pending good behavior and psychological evaluation.
Ethan, while not directly charged for Megan's death, did not escape legal consequences. He was charged with adultery, a rare prosecution of this technically still illegal act in Wisconsin, and more significantly, with reckless endangerment due to his role in the events leading to the violent outcome. The judge, noting the indirect but undeniable link between Ethan's actions and the tragedy that unfolded, sentenced him to 3 years in prison. This sentence was accompanied by a mandatory requirement for extensive psychological counseling and community service upon release, aimed at rehabilitating him and allowing him to make amends to the community he had helped fracture. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the Bennett family retreated from public life. The scandal had torn apart not just their family but had shaken the entire community's sense of trust and security.